Good day to you all. Welcome to the latest video. Hope you're all well and thank you for tuning in to listen to me. Today my effort is going to be called Sticks and Stones. I don't know how many of the modern children remember the little refrain that used to be chanted by children when name-calling run riot in the schoolyard, or when the girls were doing their skipping. But here it is. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That's not the philosophy that the powers that be that want to control you, they don't subscribe to that theory at all. In the UK, the police are now questioning what people think. A recent intervention by a police squad to a man, and they addressed him as follows: "We are here to check what you are thinking." It's George Orwell's 84 horror story come true. The thought police are now operating. Hate speech laws in England and Scotland, mostly in Scotland, generated 8,000 reported crimes in the first week. It's recently been legislated. The police did mildly warn the MPs, those in power that were going to bring this law in, that such a law is not workable. But they brought it in anyway. And the results are horrific, as expected. The police simply cannot cope with the demands upon their time to go out and arrest the people being accused of hate speech laws. It's no surprise that hate speech laws have been proposed in all the Western countries at about the same time. Have you noticed? I think Canada was one of the first to attempt this road. England flirted with it. Our ex-Prime Minister flirted with it. The Scottish people, being very staunch, they didn't flirt with it, they implemented it. Do you doubt that it is not a result of instruction from neocons and those that are there to control us, and that benefit most from that control, the very wealthy top 5%, 10% of the elite, who seek to govern us rigidly? They send the instructions out to all the leaders of the countries in the West, and they all decide upon the same course of action roughly about the same time. Now, that cannot be a coincidence. It has to be instructions. And anybody with an open mind, and a mind to think with, would have to agree with that. These things don't break out all over the world at the same instance without some functioning body behind it, organising it. And that's proved again by the very language of the legitimacy they try and impose upon these things. They all speak from the same sheet of paper pretty well. Now, the instruction from on high go out, and our so-called leaders take them to heart. Well, it's in their interest too, because if they don't follow instructions, they'll be dismissed. There'll be actions taken to see that they don't win the next election, or even if they last to the next election. Excuse me. Now, the social media is really challenging this context. The mainstream media, being owned by those who are implementing such measures, don't question it. As a matter of fact, they condone and support it. The social media is really challenging them on this control of the narrative, and it is becoming dangerous to those who are in control. They are beginning to get worried, and consequently they react more and more viciously. You can compare the direction we're going with this subject as to what happened in the Soviet Union, and I'll defy anybody to deny that. The Soviet Union suppressed freedom of speech. That was its first main function. You've got to remove any semblance of pushback, of people not agreeing with you. Now, one of the symptoms here of that has been recently the Minister for the Media here was sacked. She was sacked owing to the fact that she lost control. And the media, who so far has been the spokesperson for those in power, were displaced because the people that are paying their wages are the corporations who want profit. And eventually they decided, well, New Zealand is not really worth spending many millions of dollars propping up a news media that nobody is watching. We can't make profit off that. The advertisers won't advertise, won't pay advertising. The people watching it don't believe anything we say and therefore turn off. You can argue which came first, the chicken or the egg. Did people stop watching the media and then they go and become the spokesperson, spokespeople for the powers that be? Or was it the other way around? In my opinion, they become liars, proponents of the things that our so-called leaders, who are really our governing body, the ones that decide what's right for you and me, not the other way around as democracy is supposed to work. No, goodness me, no. So she didn't keep control of that, and suddenly there was a danger that the news media wasn't going to exist. Well, can you imagine what a politician would feel if they discovered that the very mouthpiece that they continually use to control, direct the public is silenced completely, and it's all up to the social media. More and more the social media is gaining control anyway, because it's the only one among a lot of it, it's telling the truth and is informing people of things that are going on in the world that the mainstream media and our government certainly doesn't want us to know about. So they pulled the plug on the news. Terrible, isn't it? Our new government has proudly declared that it is going to ban the wearing of gang patches. No, I don't care whether they do or not, because the problem doesn't lie there really. The biggest gangs are the ones that are doing more damage to this country than either the mongrel mob or the headhunters or any of them. They don't wear gang patches. We actually vote them into power. And then we lead them to their own devices to wreak damage on us of unprecedented severity. And they're called Labor, National, or all the political parties when it comes to that. They're all run on the same schemes. So banning the gang patches isn't going to make one iota of difference to how New Zealand operates. The crime levels or the damage done to our society is not hinging on the wearing or the banning of gang patches. Changing the subject, not one for the better, I'm sorry to say, but Ukraine is about to fall, as predicted 2 years ago. There was no way it was ever going to win. The sanctions on Russia have been a miserable failure, and that was supposed to cause Russia to collapse in a heap and allow the powers that be in America to swoop in and gather up the wealth of that country. The plot was foiled. Russia didn't cooperate. Biden, Blinken, Sullivan and Newland, the plot unravelled. It's about to happen. My guess, I've been wrong before, so don't hold me to it, I would think 2 at the most 3 months. Now Blinken, not satisfied with the horrific damage he's caused in Ukraine and the European Union and the UK to his own country, was recently in China. He wasn't well received. He wasn't given a visiting dignitaries welcome, no red carpet, no major officials to greet him at the airport. It was lukewarm, to say the best. He was there to threaten China with sanctions. He accused China of supplying Russia with equipment to enable them to fight the war in Ukraine, of which there's no proof of that. No doubt they're supplying things like chips and bits and pieces of that. They're certainly not supplying major weapons or ammunition or bombs. But America professes to take on the Chinese to say you will no longer deal with Russia, and if you do, we're going to sanction you. And if you don't stop dealing with Russia, we will stop you. Look how well that's worked for Russia. But these people never learn anything, so they go on. New Zealand had better watch out. Sanctions on Russia worked out disastrously for the US allies. EU, in particular Germany, their economies have been totally destroyed by the 2 years of war that's gone on in Ukraine, which was totally avoidable, and the direct result of interference of America in the affairs of Russia. Now, if we continue to allow our direction to be set by these same people that set the direction for Ukraine, the same thing is about to happen to us. I should point out that quite recently there's been reports, it's gone on for a few months now actually, that there are troops, USA troops, on an island that nominally belongs to Taiwan, that is only 3 miles off the coast of mainland China. There is USA troops there training the Taiwanese army on these islands. The US has just voted to supply Taiwan with many billions more of armament, exactly as they did in Ukraine prior to the outbreak of the war there. So the same scenario in Ukraine is developing. Sanctions against Russia and now China, then war, and if New Zealand is stupid enough to participate, it will end up like Ukraine, Europe, the UK. We will be ruined. People like Luxon and Winston Peters are living in a fantasy world of the past. America no longer has total control of world affairs. Quite the opposite. It no longer has the strength in its economy or its military power to enforce its power that it had up until a few years ago. And yet our leaders continue to believe we have to continue to trot like lapdogs at the heels of the USA masters. Those that are manipulating world affairs in the West have instructed the ambassador from Ukraine, the Ukrainian ambassador, to come down to New Zealand and prepare our wonderful leaders for the directions that are following hard on his heels. He visits New Zealand to warn New Zealand that Russia will look to the Pacific if, read that as when, Ukraine falls. The scenario they're proposing is the same one they trotted out in Vietnam era, as I well remember. If we don't fight them in Vietnam, we'll fight them in Wellington. We'll fight them in New York. We must stop them where they are. The Chinese and the Russians are going to pour out over the world and conquer the world. There's no evidence whatsoever, and many, many very, very knowledgeable ambassadors, people that are involved in this scenario, have spoken up and said there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that this is the case. We are again being sold a long line of lies to keep the industrial going for the military power, the money that it creates for America. Simple as that. The money that has just been passed by the US Senate, the billions to go to Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. They don't get there. They go into the pockets of the corrupt, both in America, in Ukraine, and in Israel. It's not about fighting for democracy. That is a total and utter lie, fallacy. Don't swallow that line of thought. It is simply not true. Now to finish up, I will no longer warn of the dangers of the loss of cash. The scenario that we're being set up for by the big banks, probably very soon the loss of Kiwi Bank, which is the last tiny forlorn spark of hope that we may be able to overcome what is about to descend on us. It certainly won't be with the help of our leaders, our politicians, our MPs. They're all too busy saying yes. I'm not going to speak any more of it because I'm wasting my time. I can't convince anybody that I'm right. Everybody wants to put their head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. The loss of freedom of speech is engulfing us. Our universities are being muzzled. Speakers that are engaged to speak at a university are quickly shut up and denied the right to even talk. If people accept that concept, all is lost, and I'm wasting my time standing here waving my little flag. I'm doing no good. If it's leading us to economic ruin, by a war against China over Taiwan, by participating in AUKUS, which is the next step along the road that we're going to take. I'm powerless to do anything about it, obviously. The numbers of people watching my program don't increase. The number of people contact their MPs and protesting don't increase. It's obviously I'm not very good at trying to convince people the problem. So I'm not making any more videos until events happen that cannot be denied, that will confront you in the face, that can no longer be ignored. So no more videos until Ukraine war ends. Perhaps that will shake up our useless, incompetent leaders. I think a financial crisis in the USA will follow fairly quickly behind the fall of Ukraine. Their banks are in terrible order. Their debt level is 35, I think, trillion dollars now, and increases by 1 trillion every 100 days. I think they said within 3 to 5 years, the cost of paying the interest on their debt will be the biggest expense on the books of America. It will cost them more to pay the interest on their debt than they spend on healthcare, the military, infrastructure. And yet they continue to maintain the fiction that they are very wealthy, the wealthiest country in the world, the most powerful, with the most powerful military, none of which is true, none of which is accurate. So I'm going to go quiet until events give me something to talk about. I'm tired of trying to warn of things that other people can't see. So all the best to you until then. There's one little satisfaction I'm going to look forward to. It's not very often a person of 83 sitting in his house, sitting in front of a TV screen, computer screen I should say, gets the chance to say to 5 million people, I told you so. All the best. Catch you again another day. Cheerio.